All right. I think Republican voters, and quite frankly, I think all American voters sent a pretty big message the last couple of weeks. First in Louisiana, unseating an incumbent senator there. And then last night in Texas, unseating a second Republican senator. I think Americans seem to be a little upset that the Senate is the graveyard of good ideas. What message do you think they sent last night?
Well, I think one thing is pretty clear after the primaries, not just in Louisiana and Texas, but also in Kentucky and Indiana, that President Trump's endorsement and support is still very critical in these elections. We've seen him have 100% success in all of the campaigns that he has engaged in. Take a look at Thomas Massie in Kentucky, and then, of course, the results with Senator Cassidy in Louisiana and now Cornyn in Texas. I think voters are sending a strong message that they do expect action out of the Senate, and they support the president.
On the Save America Act, this is obviously something that has been a huge disappointment to the president, the fact that it has not gotten passed. But Leader Thune seems to be finding ways to maneuver around it. Is there still time to get it done? And was this message strong enough to get Thune to get it passed?
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, the Save America Act is one of the most critical pieces of legislation that we could pass this Congress. I have encouraged and been hopeful that the Senate might adjust the filibuster to be able to get this done. Make no mistakes, Democrats will do this to us on a number of issues, especially if they're given control. And if they allow illegal immigrants to vote in our elections, then we have lost the country. Now, one of the things the Democrats say is that voter fraud among illegal immigrants is not widespread. But as we saw in Bush v. Gore, it doesn't have to be widespread to change the outcome of an election. President Biden and congressional Democrats wanted illegal immigrants to stream across the southern border so that they could count in the Electoral College and in the census to count for the Electoral College, as well as to change not just the electoral map, but also the congressional map. The Save America Act is a critical piece of legislation requiring only U.S. citizens can vote in our elections. I hope the Senate will swiftly pass it, and I hope that this will send us a very stark message that this is what the American people voted for, and this is what they expect, and they're showing that at the polls.
Congresswoman, I think a lot of the media are talking up the Democrats, but when you look at the way the fall race is lining up, we could have a deal with Iran, maybe a deal with Cuba. We already have a deal with Venezuela. There's about a dozen House Democratic seats that are now going to be more competitive for Republicans. Gas will probably be coming down in the fall. And the candidates that the Democrats have chosen, well, they think God is non-binary. There are 6 genders. They wear Nazi tattoos, and they have some very strange ideas that run right into the face of Americans' wishes. How do you assess what Republicans' opportunities are in the fall? What's the key for Republicans holding control of Congress?
Well, a few things that I'm looking at is how well is our fundraising versus their fundraising. And the Republican National Committee and the National Republican Campaign Committee, which funds our congressional campaigns or helps to fund, especially in these tight races, they are raising more money than they ever have. Speaker Mike Johnson is raising more money than we ever have. And in comparison to the Democrats who are really at record lows for fundraising, I think that speaks volumes. I also think that these candidates that the Democrats are nominating are so far out of the mainstream that they won't be chosen by the voters this fall. I think it will be an uphill battle for Democrats, and I'm bullish on the election and the election results that we'll have in November. I do think, that Republicans will hold the House. I think we'll hold the Senate. And again, we are really pushing the Senate to pass the Save America Act because that is the safeguard for these elections moving forward. Beyond that, we need to make sure that illegal immigrants cannot count in the census for the apportionment for the Electoral College and for our congressional districts, or states like Indiana, where I am, will lose seats. Red states will lose congressional representation to states like New York and California, who have welcomed in the millions of illegal immigrants that streamed across the southern border.
Yeah. Great point.
Congresswoman, you are so keyed in on common sense issues, and I think a lot of Americans look at our policies and a lot of blue states policies like California regarding commercial driver's licenses, and they think to themselves, if you can't speak English, why on earth are you driving basically a deadly bullet down the freeway? You introduced Delilah's Law. Tell us about it.
Well, Delilah's Law is to make sure that we don't have unqualified illegal immigrants driving our heavy trucks across highways throughout the United States. Indiana already passed this law under the leadership of our state's attorney general and others who pushed for the Delilah's Law or a Delilah Law to be passed in Indiana. We've seen many fatalities in Indiana from illegal immigrants driving heavy trucks. And so we said enough is enough. I joined with Senator Jim Banks and others to introduce this bill. And what we want to make sure is that people driving these trucks are safe to drive and that they're legal citizens and legally able to drive. In the United States, in some states, it's easier to get a commercial driver's license as an illegal immigrant than it is for our U.S. military veterans who've already been driving heavy trucks in the military. It's harder for them to get a CDL when they get out of service than it is for an illegal immigrant. That's just wrong. We do need truck drivers, but we should make sure that they're safe to drive because they are driving these very dangerous trucks on our highways.
Yeah, so important. Last few years, Congresswoman taught us a lot about what teachers were teaching our children in school, and we learned that a lot of it was done with federal funding. You recently passed this, in the House, the Stopping Indoctrination and Protecting Kids Act, something I know you fought very hard for. Tell us why it's so important.
Well, we've had teachers across the country, and some teachers are great teachers, but we've had others who are very radicalized. And when a child, even a middle school child comes in and says they want to use a different pronoun, schools were keeping that information from the parents, and they were encouraging this gender dysphoria. So we want to make sure that none of that is happening in our schools, but also that parents always are in the picture and are notified. That's one of the scariest things as a parent, is to think that you're going to send your child off to school to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, and they come home and they're asking you in kindergarten and other grades about pronouns, when we know that this is a form of indoctrination in the schools. So this is common sense to make sure parents are in the driver's seat. I have repeatedly said, those are the policies that we should be putting forward to make parents in control of their kids' educational decisions and these very difficult conversations that they may be or may not want to have with their kids during this period of time.
Congresswoman, before we let you go, last night, Just the News broke this story. Joe Biden sued the Justice Department trying to keep the release of the tape of his interview with a federal prosecutor. Normally, most Americans assume what the president does is public business, and we should hear it. Joe Biden, for some reason, wants to keep that conversation with prosecutors secret. Where do you come down on that issue?
Well, I think the tape should be released, but honestly, having seen Joe Biden's presidency, I'm not sure it will tell us much more than we could see with our very own eyes of his decline mentally as he was the president of the United States. And we really don't know who was making the decision on the auto pen and other things at the end of his term. The American people saw this for what it was, which is a decline in his mental state. Democrats covered it up, and this interview on tape will clearly show what millions of Americans knew at the time, including House and Senate Republicans, that Joe Biden was not in a good mental state to be president of the United States, and Democrats continued to cover for him for the sake of their own political power, which, John, this is yet another example of a power grab, desperate power grab that the Democrats have exemplified over and over again. We saw it with Lois Lerner in targeting conservatives using the IRS. Yeah. We've seen them use the DOJ. So what I want Americans to know when they go to the polls this November is remember what it was like. Remember how it was under Democrat leadership before. Let's not go back to that. Let's look forward to what we can achieve under President Trump and House Republicans. Look at what we've already done under the One Big Beautiful Bill, extending the tax cuts permanently. We have had so many accomplishments under this president in this short period of time, more than some presidents in 2 terms. I hope that Americans will remember that and will not let us go back to where we were before, because that would be a very dangerous place for the country.
Yeah, no doubt.